Hello, and welcome once again to Stabler and Friends. I'm your host, Stabler, and today my friend is Mike Middleton. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. We also got my pup Reggie here hanging out with us. He gets a little nervous when we do the laundry, so he's just hanging tight. So I figured we'd be downstairs tonight. Also, I had a bit of I didn't like the sound of my podcast from my end last week. I thought it was too echoey. So working on getting some sound pads up in my podcast room, and they're not staying up. So I didn't want to rush it and have a bad sound again. So we're down here hanging out in the man cave, the sports cave, because Haley says she likes sports too, and she's not a man. So we'll call it the sports cave. But anyways, last week, Mike and I did a mock draft. Well, Mike did a draft, and I just hung out and listened and learned. We did it just hours before the NFL draft began. We've taken a week to let the draft breathe a little bit, and now here we are to give our take on how the teams fared. Mike, you gave us your first round mock last week, like we already said, but give us an idea of how you feel like you did.
Yeah, I think all things considered, it being a weird year, I think it still went pretty well. I had 10 players that I mocked at the correct pick in the draft. 8 of those 10 went also to the right team. In my mock, I had Penei Sewell going at 7, where he did go, but I had the Chargers trading up to 7 to get him. That didn't happen. The Lions stayed at 7 and took him. And then the Chargers ended up taking the top tackle on that was left, Rashawn Slater, that some people thought was better than Sewell. So they still targeted the same position, just they got the other guy. And then I had Elijah Vera Tucker going to the Vikings at 14. He did go at 14, but the Jets traded up to that spot and took him instead of the Vikings.
Yeah, man, I actually had a lot of fun just because we did this podcast together. And I think this is probably the first year that I printed off your list and I was watching along as the draft went, and you did not disappoint, man. Like all the info that you gave last week, was on point. If they didn't go to the right team, that doesn't matter. At least we kind of had an idea of who needed what and what was to be expected. And I think getting a third of the first round was amazing. It also got me really, really anxious when it was the next night and all those first rounders that you said haven't been picked yet, and the Dolphins were on the clock coming up, and it's just, I felt frustrated, but we're going to get into kind of that a little bit later, how we feel our teams fared. What else you got, Mike?
Yeah, so looking at the draft, I had mocked that the NFC East was really interesting because you had 3 teams picking in a row, 10, 11, 12. And I had the Cowboys and the Eagles both needing a corner. As it turned out, Horn and Surtain go at 9 and 10, so there was no corners on the board for the Cowboys to take. So they end up trading out of the position, which shows me they were going to take a corner if it was there. And then they traded within their own division to the Eagles, which almost never happens. You usually don't trade with your rival. And the Eagles traded up in front of the Giants to take Devontae Smith, and I had the Giants taking Devontae Smith. So obviously that's where they were going to go had the Eagles not traded up.
Yeah, for sure. I was excited to see that Devontae Smith pick. I actually didn't put the pieces together. I put the pieces together with the reunions from college with Joe Burrows and Jamar Chase. Put together the combo between Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle, but it took me till I saw a tweet or my dad mentioned it or something to me about Devonta Smith going to the Eagles where Jalen Hurts is. I forgot, because Jalen Hurts, if you didn't know, was a part of Alabama, won a championship with them. Tua stepped up on that championship game. Sounds like he was going to win the spot. Jalen Hurts transferred to Oklahoma.
Yep.
So yeah, so after but before the transfer, Smith was still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So I love that. I feel like chemistry between players goes such a long way, whether it's quarterback, receiver, or a defensive back squad, knowing who's covering where. It just makes such a big difference. So
right, absolutely
pretty exciting there. You were talking about your Broncos. If Fields were to fall to 9, you guys might be taking him, and you passed on him. What were you thinking when that happened?
Yeah, so like you said, we were a few hours away from the draft when we recorded last time. And that's when the Aaron Rodgers stuff broke.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to think if that impacted their draft strategy. The reports coming out of Denver were that if the right guy fell, they would draft him at 9. Mac Jones and Justin Fields were both on the board, and they didn't draft them. So either Trey Lance was the guy that they would have drafted at 9,
Mhm.
or they thought, hey, we have a really good shot at getting Aaron Rodgers, so we're not going to draft the quarterback, Justin Fields,
Yeah.
and we're going to go another direction. So time will tell if they do end up getting A-Rod and if that was what changed their draft direction.
Yeah, for sure. Also, you were talking about the Saints talking about trading up possibly in the first round there to get one of those cornerbacks.
Yeah,
And
and Sean Payton confirmed that in an interview after the draft, that they were trying to move into the top 10. They wanted one of those two corners. He didn't name which one he wanted, uh, but he said that the team either weren't interested in moving back all the way to 28, where the Saints were picking, or in order to move back, they were asking for more than the Saints were willing to give up. And so they were hoping one of those corners fell out of the top 10. They didn't. And so the Saints ended up staying put at 28.
yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work out your way and you got to
Yep.
stick with the cards you got. Injury wise, a lot of players that had questionable injuries through the draft, I noticed, slipped a lot further than usual. Is that because of lack of exposure? They don't know, or were they actually injured and maybe people are reaching on them? What do you think? I know you had Ojolari in the first round.
Yeah. And so I think, if you're just taking the player, Ojolari would have been a first round pick. I mentioned on the pod last time that his knee was flagged as a potential issue. So he ends up falling to the second round. I think with a lot of these situations, guys with medicals probably fell further than they normally would, because in a normal year, when you're doing research on a prospect, you can bring them into your facility and have your doctors evaluate them.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously with the COVID off season, that didn't happen. So teams are probably a little bit more gun shy at taking a risk on a guy that they haven't had their own staff look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that goes a long ways. For me, I'm excited when I see somebody like that, even if there is a potential injury, slipping as far as they do to a point where it becomes a value and you're not losing anything to take a shot on it.
Absolutely.
I was very, very surprised. I didn't know much about that Jeremiah Owusu Karamoa.
Koromoa. Yeah.
Karamoa. So he fell to the 50th pick in the second round, which is like deep into the second round.
Right.
And he was on the top of the big board, best available player for going into night 2, and just kept sliding and sliding and sliding until he went to the Browns at 50. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So almost universally, he was graded out as a top 20 player in the draft. So, he was a first round player. I couldn't understand why he was falling. I had no idea. I was pretty shocked as he fell that, teams weren't even like trading into the back of the first round to get him, that still had a need there, or that he didn't go early in the second. So the Browns get him at 50, and then it came out after the draft that he had been flagged for a heart condition.
Oh.
And so that's another one of those situations where teams didn't get him into their own facility and have their own doctors look at him. So they might have been a little reluctant to pull the trigger too high. This could be one of the steals of the draft. He's such a good player. He has that tweener status where he's only like 215, which is a super small linebacker. But with the way that the game is now, where you need your guys to be able to cover, and he's just so versatile, and you can blitz them and everything. Like the Browns, so long as they have a good plan for him, which they should, he's going to be a stud because he's so good. He's so versatile. So
we had that same situation in the draft last year with the guy that you said was a tweener. What was his name? Isaiah
Simmons, and he still went top 10.
Yeah.
Clemson. Yeah. And this is a similar kind of thing where.
And how did he fare last year? Did he
struggled he struggled at the beginning of the year. And part of it was, for some reason, the Cardinals just weren't giving him snaps. Like, I didn't really understand. And when he did get out there, he looked a little lost. But the second half of the season, he started to really play. And I think he's going to have a monster year too.
Cool. So with everybody calls him JOK.
Yes.
What are we looking at here? Is he going to jump right in, or do you think he's going to have to be eased into the NFL with his size?
Yeah, so I think probably right from the beginning, you're going to use him as like a sub package linebacker. So when you're in like nickel and dime, he's going to be out there with his ability to coverage for coverage. But then you can also be creative and shoot him through some gaps and everything when teams are spread out because they want to pass and they're heavy set like that. So you probably don't want him being that traditional middle linebacker thumper in the middle because he just doesn't have the size for it.
Yeah.
But he
Remind
plays.
me.
I mean, he hits like that's not a problem. The
Yeah.
physicality is not a problem. It's just the size.
Hey, remind me what nickel and dime packages. That's extra defensive back on both of
That
them, right? But one
yeah,
has 5 defensive backs and the other 6, or
yeah. So if you figure basically like the current base package for NFL, because it's such a passing league,
Mhm.
is nickel. So where you'll have 2 corners on the outside, you've got someone in the slot, whether it be a nickel or a safety, and then your two deep safeties. So
You got
5
both up.
DBs is nickel. That's basically base. So like 75% of snaps in the NFL, the defense is in nickel.
Uh-huh.
And then if you add a 6th DB, that's your dime
That's
package.
okay. That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
Yeah, so you're
And
basically you're
who
taking
do you eliminate off the
linebacker,
field? A
you're
linebacker?
taking linebackers off the field, and so when you're in nickel and dime, you kind of want 1 or 2 guys that are quicker and have some range because it's not the traditional 3 or 4 guys there in the middle.
Yeah.
So it's more of a covered look.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for the update on that.
Yep,
I'm
no
sure
problem.
people at home will enjoy learning a little bit too, because there's sometimes you hear these terms and you don't know exactly what people are talking about. I'm guilty of it myself sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, I mean, that was a surprise the JOK dropped. Were there any? I know there's always the head scratchers where like, why did they reach that far?
Yeah.
Any shockers, surprises there for you?
Yeah. And there's one team that chronically does this, and so it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's just what they do. Um, the Oakland Raiders. And I know Alex Leatherwood is Bama, and I think he's got potential, but taking him at 17 when a lot of people had him being probably in the second round. I've even seen him in the third in some mocks because he's a little bit limited. He's probably got to be a guard at the NFL level. He played tackle at college, but doesn't quite have the athleticism or the measurables. And he struggled in pass protection. So he's fantastic in run, but kind of struggles in pass protection. So the Raiders taking him at 17 felt like a reach. And there was a better player on the board. Christian Darrisaw, who ends up going to the Vikings later, much better prospect as a tackle. I think that's where the Raiders should have went. They said that they plan on playing Leatherwood at right tackle, and so it's a little strange.
Huh.
But like I said, it reminds me of when they took Farrell over Josh Allen, who almost everyone had Allen way higher. Allen makes the Pro Bowl as a rookie, so
Yeah.
they missed the boat there. And then last year with Damon Arnett in the first, who was kind of seen as a second or third round corner, and there was a lot of guys on the board graded higher. So that's kind of what the Raiders do.
Yeah, Raiders going Raider.
Raiders going to Raider.
Any other surprises?
Yeah, so at the end of the first, there were a couple guys that went that probably were like mid second round grade, so it was a little surprising. The Saints taking Peyton Turner, who's an edge, and the Packers taking Eric Stokes, who's a corner. Stokes blew up his pro day. He's very fast in a straight line, but he doesn't have the great instincts. He doesn't have a lot of agility, and to be a boundary corner, like you really got to have the hips to mirror your receiver. So he's got some work that needs to be done there, and not many teams, or at least from my understanding, had him as a first round guy.
Yeah. That's tough when you see your team take somebody that's projected a lot lower. I mean, sometimes they get their guy and it works out, but I mean,
Right.
you see other times where it's like, I'm still like scratching my head for the Giants a few years ago with that Daniel Jones
Absolutely.
and I mean, sometimes those things do pan out, but that wasn't one of them. And I just think like
Right.
you miss on these drafts, like not only just in the first round, because the first round's not nearly as important as a draft as a whole, but if you just are slowly missing here and there, like that sets your team back so far. I've seen it
does.
with all my crappy Dolphins, Lions, Browns teams over the years,
Right.
Real quick, let's give a shout out to our social media squad that actually commented this week on a few questions. I asked everybody what they felt their team did, give them a draft grade, or what they liked, what they didn't like. Gonna give a quick shout out to everybody. So Sammy S, diehard Miami Dolphins fan, and she posted, "I think we killed it. as a Dolphins fan myself, I'm happy to hear people that were positive about the draft, because I felt like the first 2 nights, everybody I wanted was taken just the pick before. I mean, it started Jamar Chase. I'm still happy with Jalen Waddle. Don't get me wrong. I'm happy with
Right.
him, but I think Chase was the guy.
Right.
And I thought somehow he would slip down to us. He didn't. Second round, I mean, I don't necessarily like reaching too early on running backs, but I did like that running back from North Carolina after you told me about him last week.
Devontae Williams. Yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to my dad about it, and he loves college football too, and he was really high on him. So I was excited, and the team in front of me was not going to draft him. They didn't need a running back, but then your good old Denver Broncos came in and swooped him up. So I mean, I missed there. We traded back. I thought that JOK would be a good fit, somebody along the lines of that. And we got a guy named Holland who I don't know much about. And it turns out, talking to you and a few others, that it's actually a pretty good pick. So we'll talk about my Dolphins here in a bit, but let's get back to the shout outs. A friend of the program and co-host of when I do my weekly in-season NFL podcast, Justin Stevens. He's a Carolina Panthers fan, funniest guy. Social media game is off the chain. If you guys want to just follow him on Facebook, Justin Stevens is his name. He's posting funny things, videos all the time. He's great. So check him out. But he just wanted to talk about Thomas Fletcher from Alabama, who got drafted by Carolina, doing a spin kick to do the bottle challenge where they kick the bottle off.
Yeah.
He's a big boy.
He is.
He's a big boy that can get up like that. So that's pretty cool. You like him?
Yeah. And, give Justin a little shout out. I think his team did pretty well. I was surprised they took JC Horn there at 8. Mm-hmm. I thought they might trade back, and they may have been able to still land him if they traded back a couple spots. But, like I said, the NFC East teams were also looking at corner. But they got a guy that you and I both like, in Hubbard, the running back from Oklahoma State. Yeah. I thought getting him on day 3 was pretty good.
Yeah, that'll be a nice compliment for
Christian
McCaffrey. Yeah. All right, moving on. Sean W. gave his Raiders a generous B-. He really liked the second round draft pick with Trayvon Morwick. Did you like that pick?
The only pick of theirs I liked, yes. Okay. But they nailed that one. So
yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. Give him a little bit of hope. And then Kevin W., Broncos fan, said he liked the picks his Broncos made. He also mentioned that he loved the clip of the Broncos GM hanging up the phone and saying, "I got to go. Somebody else is going to give me more." And he hung up on whoever that was. I missed that. Is this his first year as doing the GM stuff? I think he mentioned.
Yeah, so he had been an assistant GM in the front office for the Vikings for several years. And the Vikings have historically drafted really well and been good talent evaluators. So basically, John Elway is kind of stepping away from the GM role, and George Payton took over. So for this year, as a transition, Elway's still part of the front office, but George Payton is now making the personnel decisions. And so this was his first draft.
Cool. Yeah, I love this little that we got a little input back from the listeners of the show. I thought it was really fun seeing how everybody's perspective is different for the draft. Like whether you're watching your team or just as a whole, like what people are looking for, what people catch on their social media that I wouldn't necessarily catch, but like just like even the bottle flip kick and seeing the owner hang up the phone. I'm sure you saw it. I didn't see it till after, but yeah. If you're listening to the show, we would love to hear from you, whether you'd be a part of it coming on the show, that's great. Or if you'd like to follow us, we're on Twitter and Facebook. It's under Stabler and Friends on Facebook. Under Twitter, it will say Stabler and Friends. I originally was called the Talk Tirade, but I'm kind of changing the direction of where I want to go with the podcast. So look up at Talk Tirade and feel free to comment there. Or if you just want to follow me at Stabler, the real Stabler on Twitter. And Mike, give us a shout out of your Twitter handle.
It's at Third Eye 84, and there's an underscore between Third and I.
Third underscore I 84.
Yep,
you got it. Cool, man. Let's get into. We don't want to go through every team.
Right.
Let's do your top 5 draft classes that you thought, and then your bottom 5.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of list the top 5, bottom 5, and then not necessarily every pick that each team made, but just kind of the notable ones on why I graded them there.
Cool.
So the Cleveland Browns stood out to me. They got Greg Newsome, who I had as the 3rd best corner in the draft and a top 20 player.
Yeah.
They got him at 26, so good value, fits a need. He'll go in, be on the opposite side of Denzel Ward, and really help. Uh, they've really remade that secondary this offseason, and this is another step in that direction. And a player we've already talked about, JOK, getting him falling in the second. They get a super athletic receiver in the third. Um, James Hudson on the offensive line is a guy who probably has to sit year one, maybe even year two, but has a lot of upside as a developmental tackle. And then we had talked previously about how they needed some help at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
And between the draft in the fourth round, and then as a undrafted free agent, getting Marvin Wilson, who last year was projected as a first or second rounder, had he come out, went back to school, draft stock tanked for whatever reasons, but getting him as an undrafted free agent, I think was huge. So just top to bottom, I loved the Browns draft. I thought they nailed it.
Good. Yeah, I was excited to see they got that fast receiver from Auburn. I like
Auburn,
it.
yeah.
Okay. Browns made the cut. Who else you got?
So I really liked what the Ravens did. I thought going into the offseason, they needed to get some help for Lamar Jackson in the passing game. You've got Hollywood Brown there, but you needed a good outside receiver and just more passing options. And not only do they get Bateman in the first round, who could have went earlier than he did, but Tylan Wallace is another really good receiver that they got in the fourth. So I liked that a lot. And then the edge that they got at the end of the first round, Owe, is just physical freak, the most athletic edge in the draft class. And the way that the Ravens are, they develop those outside linebacker edge players so well. Like he's going to be a perfect fit there.
Yeah.
So, and then I got a shout out their undrafted free agents as well. Our Darius Washington was one of my favorite players in the entire draft, and it makes sense that he wasn't drafted because he's very, very small. He plays safety for TCU, so him and Moreg were the two they played together. Washington is probably like the most instinctive safety in the entire class. The problem is that he's really small. That's the only thing holding him back. He would have been maybe a top 10, 15 pick if he was, 6'1", 200 pounds. But he reminds me a lot of Tyrann Mathieu from the Chiefs. Same kind of player.
Badger.
Yeah, he's like a honey badger. So that's a guy who I think is going to stick and make the roster and be a player. So cool. Really liked what the Ravens did.
Cool. Now, last week, Bears fans probably weren't too happy with us. We said that we felt like the Texans and the Bears had really no direction. It seemed like they wasted a lot of their draft picks and money for Khalil Mack. They wasted draft picks to move up for Trubisky. So we didn't have very high hopes. Right. But you were telling me that Chicago had made it in your top 5 of the draft class.
They did. So like you said, a team without a direction now has a direction.
Yeah.
They made the move. The Vikings reportedly were going to take Justin Fields at 14 had he slipped to them. So at 20, the Bears weren't going to get one of these quarterbacks because obviously Mac Jones goes 15 to the Patriots. Yeah. Moving up to 11, being my number 2 quarterback in the class, even though they had signed Andy Dalton and all that, noise that he was going to be the starter, they got way better by getting Justin Fields. Tevin Jenkins then in the second round was a guy I had as a first rounder at tackle. So building the line in front of him, I mean, I don't think you could have done better with their first 2 picks.
Yeah, and then I liked those Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and he's just a monster, probably the most physical offensive lineman in the draft. Great pick. And then they don't have any picks in the third or the fourth, but then they come really strong in the 6th round. Like I liked all 3 of their 6th round picks. After the top 4 running backs in the class that we talked about before, my 5th guy was Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech, and they got him in the 6th round. So bringing in that depth to play with Montgomery, I just think they nailed it. So
yeah, nice. Yeah. That's 3 on the list. Give me 3. Number 4. I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, the Detroit Lions. So I really like the philosophy of when you're trying to build a winning team, starting in the trenches, rebuilding, your offensive line, your defensive line. That's where a lot of teams are won and lost. They don't get as much credit as the skill positions, but it's super important. So at 7, they get Sewell, which is fantastic. He could have went 5, to Cincinnati. A lot of people had him going there. And then we talked about how this was a really weak defensive tackle class.
Mhm.
I had Barmore as like the tier one defensive tackle in this class. That tier two, I had two guys, and they're both Detroit Lions now.
Nice.
So, and it's a nice contrast because McNeil is that nose tackle. He's that run defender, but he's quick. He can give you some pass rush, but he's that big body guy. And then from Washington, I always get his last name wrong, but I'll just call him Levi. He's more of that penetrating pass rusher, and putting those two together in the middle works perfectly. So I really like what they did there. And then even in round 3, Melifonwu is a kind of a developmental corner, but he's got the size, the speed, super athletic. So it's the kind of prospect you want to take a chance on in the 3rd round.
Nice.
Yeah.
Finally, I don't know if this is biased or if it actually is. If you talk yourself into believing this, or if you actually believe it, so talk to me. Denver Broncos made your top 5.
Yeah, and so there's a big caveat on this, on what ends up happening with the quarterback position. In order for this draft to be as good as I think that it is, either they have to get an upgrade via, Aaron Rodgers, or if magically somehow Deshaun Watson's situation clears up and that's not a big issue, or you're really banking on Drew Lock taking a big step this season, which can happen. We just saw Josh Allen do it, but that's a bit of a gamble. Passing on Justin Fields could haunt this team for a very long time if the quarterback position doesn't get figured out and he balls out in Chicago.
Yeah.
So, assuming that they do okay at QB, whichever avenue that is, I love the players that they drafted. Pat Surtain, amazing corner, top corner in the draft. The Broncos already have one of the best secondaries in the NFL, but Kyle Fuller and Bryce Callahan are scheduled to be free agents next year. So you get a premium prospect now who can come in and play, get his feet wet, take over next year.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams, we mentioned, there was 4 premier, and even that, the top 3 were significantly better than the 4th option. Running backs in the draft, they just lost Philip Lindsay. They just got someone way better than Philip Lindsay in round 2. You mentioned that Miami, they were set to pick him at 36. So Denver had to move up to 35 to get him. So I'm happy with that. And then I just thought they got some good value from there. Quinn Miners is a guy that had a 2nd round grade. He can play center or guard, gives him some good depth there. Baron Browning is probably the 2nd most athletic linebacker in this class behind Micah Parsons. They moved him around a lot at Ohio State. He played inside and outside, and so he kind of has to find a home and develop there. So he needs a little bit of work. But coming into Denver, it's a good situation where they already have 2 solid starters, both who are free agents next year. So again, getting a guy in the pipeline, getting him ready.
Yeah.
They draft 2 safeties. One of their starters, Kareem Jackson, free agent at the end of the year. So it was kind of a theme that they greatly increased their depth and got guys who could be starters in year 2 that aren't necessarily going to be relied on in year 1.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, if the quarterback situation doesn't work out, that's okay too, as long as you got some good talent to build around when you do have to bring in a new quarterback to try out. So it looks like there's a lot of talent. I kind of briefly looked like Spencer Rattler, and the kid from North Carolina. There's going to be some good quarterbacks next year. So if it doesn't work out, at least you got some good talent to build around. I think not reaching for a quarterback might pay off in the end. And if you do the Aaron Rodgers, we'll talk about him at the end here. But if you do an Aaron Rodgers, that's going to obviously work out. All right, quickly give me your bottom 5 losers. Is it safe to assume Houston made it since they didn't even have a pick in the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, and I try not to knock teams too much when they don't have a lot of picks, because it's hard to say, oh, you didn't get any top 20 players. Well, you didn't have a pick in the top 20.
Yeah.
But they didn't really land anyone all that impactful either with the picks that they did have. So, they go quarterback in the 3rd. I'm not all that excited about Davis Mills. I think if you wanted a guy, if you could have gotten up a little higher for like a Kellen Mond, that may have been a better route to go. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson, but they're still in QB purgatory. They didn't fix that position. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have spent this high of a pick on that to not get a guy that you're necessarily going to be able to rely on.
Uh-huh.
Nico Collins, Brevin Jordan, there's some upside there, but they're both really unpolished. So I don't see anyone in this draft class that's going to come in and contribute the first year.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you mentioned earlier your biggest surprises was it Eric Stokes from Green Bay?
So Green Bay also
Or
made
from Georgia, getting
yeah,
drafted to Green Bay.
yeah. So the Packers made my bottom five. Again, I didn't really like hardly any of their picks. I thought they reached in the first round, they reached in the second round, they reached in the third round.
I love to hear this. I love absolutely. We can talk about how bad the Packers did every episode of my podcast, and I don't think I'll get over it. I'm just such a big Packers hater.
Yeah, just looking at their draft, my favorite player that they picked in terms of value and where they got him wasn't until the fifth round where they got a slot corner that I think could develop into something. So pretty weak draft class.
Pretty weak. Who else sucks?
The Saints. I don't think the Saints really helped themselves. They reached in the first round on Turner, I think, and I mean he could be a player, but he's a project, so it might take some time to get there. They got Werner, the linebacker from Ohio State. He's limited athletically. I think there were better players available at the same position there. Baron Browning that the Broncos took in the third, I would have taken over Werner any day of the week, and they took him in the second. So, and then another questionable pick. They needed a corner really bad. They waited till the third round. They get Paulson Adebo, who didn't play this last year. Has some upside. He's a talented player, but he's a fit for zone teams, and the Saints play man. And so I don't really understand the fit, but with some question marks regarding whether Marshawn Lattimore is going to be available or suspended, they needed to address that position, and they should have done it round one or round two and got a better player.
What's up with Marshawn Lattimore with the suspension?
Yeah, it was some issue in Ohio. I can pull it up really quick.
I'll pull that up and go on to your next team. Let me know your next team.
So then, and this is the one that I love to say every year, the Oakland Raiders. I think they got a decent player in Alex Leatherwood. I just wouldn't have taken him at 17, and I don't know many people that would have, especially with Darisaw still on the board if you wanted a right tackle specifically. I think they got good value with Morig there in the second round, but then I just don't really like the rest of their picks. I think they reached on the third round, and the safety they took in the fourth from Missouri could develop and be a player, but still not an impressive draft class.
Back to the Saints and Marshawn Lattimore. It looks like it was a gun issue in Cleveland.
Something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. You never know how the wave of the suspensions go with the NFL. Are they on lockdown, or it could be a 4-game suspension or a season, or just a go do some fines and community service and call it good. So, and then last two rounds off our bottom five of the worst draft picks this season.
So the one that I put in the bottom five was the Los Angeles Rams.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a team that didn't have a first round pick. So, that plays in that, they didn't get a top talent. But in the second round, take Atwell, a receiver out of Louisville. And he's super athletic and could fit the passing offense there. But we talked about Smith being 166 pounds. This guy's like 140, 145 pounds. He's tiny. So taking him so high, I thought, there were some other explosive players that you could get, but that maybe profile a little bit better. So again, looking at the class, Rochelle, their fourth round corner, a guy that's super athletic, but needs a lot of polish. So I don't see contributors in this group for year one.
Cool. That rounds it off for the draft, basically, of everything we talked about. Now we're going to talk about, so last week, halfway through, we both had our phones blowing up that Aaron Rodgers was demanding a trade. I heard Joe Horn come out talking about how his kid didn't get the recognition on the draft when his pick was announced because ESPN was jawing on about what we're going to do with Aaron Rodgers. I think, my take. I think Aaron Rodgers is a very selfish person. I feel like he always blames other people. His family, he has issues with. He had issues with the coach. He has issues with the GM. It's never his fault, it seems like, but everybody, I don't know, everybody seems to like him. So maybe I'm in the wrong here, but I think he's a clown. I think he's selfish, and I think that was a very selfish thing to do on draft day. He knew what he was doing. I think he put that in everybody's ears at the right time, the proper time, to really get it out there and force the hand on Green Bay. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I see both sides as far as um, I agree with you on everything you just said about Aaron Rodgers. I share that opinion. Um, but I also think Green Bay, that front office, there's issues there.
Yeah, I
And
think I want to give a little bit credit to Rodgers. The Jordan Love thing, when you're on the verge of a Super Bowl championship and you go for a quarterback of the future, when there was somebody like, I don't know if Justin Jefferson was available, but there was some really good wide receiver talent. And yeah, I think that was a bad move. It was a mistake. I feel like they can move on as well. Aaron Rodgers came into the league as a quarterback of the future. Green Bay did the same exact thing with Packers when Favre was there. You know what I mean? So it's just what they do. I feel like you just need to be understanding of it, but at the same time, like, I feel like it could be something that you just say, look, we probably made a mistake. Let's move on. And it sounds like, for how stubborn he is, that he's not going to be able to move on.
yeah, and so, part of the context on that, and you're right, there were some really good receivers available. Jalen Rager, T. Higgins, Laviska Shenault, all these players were on the board. Not only did they take Jordan Love, they traded up and gave up more assets for Jordan Love.
Yeah.
That's basically them kind of putting Rodgers on notice. But not only that, but during the season, there's been players that he really liked or connected with. One of the names that's been going around is Jake Kumaro, kind of a no-name receiver, but he was starting to develop a really good rapport with Rodgers. And Rodgers mentioned him in a press conference, and then like the next day, the Packers released him. So it was that kind of stuff. And you look at the draft, this draft, the Vikings were looking at taking Justin Fields at 14. They called Kirk Cousins to tell him that. The Packers didn't extend the same courtesy to Aaron Rodgers when they were going to make a move for Jordan Love. So I think there's just a disconnect there.
Yeah.
I also look at like Tampa Bay. Practically anybody that Tom Brady wants, they get, period.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And Rodgers is not treated the same way as some of the other guys are. So is he kind of a diva and prima donna about it? Absolutely. But other quarterbacks are as well and get treated better by their front offices.
Yeah. Can we confirm or deny that the dog in the State Farm commercials is actually his dog?
I have no idea.
That's like his one redeeming quality, is he has a dealer that looks like my buddy Reggie here.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think? Like they're going to have to, if somebody wants to trade to get Aaron Rodgers, what are they going to give up?
So if a move is going to be made, it looks like it will be a June 2nd transaction for salary cap reasons. If it happens before June 1st, the full 30 plus million cap hit would hit the Packers this year. If it happens post June 1st, it gets split between this year's cap and next year's cap. So the most likely thing would be June 2nd. There's a lot of posturing back and forth. Rodgers says he'll retire rather than go back to Green Bay. Green Bay says, we'll just let you retire instead of giving in to your demands. Eventually someone will budge, but we'll see what happens. The two teams that are kind of the most linked, because apparently he wants to go to the West Coast and the Packers won't trade him within the conference, so cross off the NFC teams, are Las Vegas and Denver. The team that's getting the most buzz is Denver. So Troy Renck, who's a Broncos insider, said that he'd been talking to industry sources, and a trade package for Aaron Rodgers would look something like a first-round pick in 2022, a first-round pick in 2023, a second rounder in one of those years, and then a promising player or players. So that's a little different than what we've heard with like Deshaun Watson, or when the Russ stuff was out there, when everyone said the conversation starts with 3 first-round picks. So, I mean, to me, it seems like it's really not that bad. value sending 2 firsts and a second, and then 1 or 2 players if you have a window of 3 or 4 years of potentially contending for a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's still a lot, but that's not much more than what the Rams gave up for Matt Stafford, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it'd be probably worth it. As a Broncos fan, at what point would you feel like you're giving up too much?
Yeah, and it's hard because when you say promising young player or players, it just depends on who they are. If the Packers say we want Jerry Jeudy and Bradley Chubb, ouch, like that
Yeah.
hurts. Like I don't know that I could give up both of those guys. I'd have a hard time giving up Jeudy, Sutton, Noah Fant, or Bradley Chubb. I think those are 4 young cornerstones that they're trying to build around, and 4 of the key players as to why Aaron Rodgers would want to play here.
Did you mention Hamler in that?
I didn't. So I love KJ Hamler, but if I had to send KJ Hamler, I would send KJ Hamler.
So that's kind of the line where we're at. Of what
yeah. I've heard Tim Patrick's name mentioned. I'd have no problem sending Tim. I love Tim, Utes fan.
Yeah.
He had a great season last year filling in for Courtland Sutton. Mm-hmm. I think he's one of only 3 players in the league that had 70 plus targets and 0 drops, like super reliable guy.
Yeah.
But he's also in the last year of his deal. Like if you can send him out as part of the package, they get their number 2 receiver opposite Devontae Adams. I'll gladly put Tim Patrick in that package.
What about if there was less promising players and more like 1st or 2nd round draft picks? How far would you go there?
Yeah, and so that's where it kind of gets mixed in. Like if I'm having to give up a Jeudy, a Sutton, a Fant, or a Chubb, I'm probably not doing 3 first rounders. Uh-huh. But if I can do a Tim Patrick, Graham Glasgow, or Draymond Jones, who have been rumored as potential options, then I could give up the 3 first round picks.
Okay. So. That's good little like way to set it up for that. Probably, do you have more to offer than the Raiders, I'd imagine? Or
yeah, I think from a young player perspective, I think Denver has more assets. It's hard to project where a future first round pick is going to land because obviously it's based on record. And if you're projecting the team getting Aaron Rodgers, I think it's kind of a null point because whether it's the Raiders or the Broncos, you're going to be picking late in the first round if you have Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. So I think, first round picks are kind of equal in that part of it. If it comes down to Aaron Rodgers' preference, I'm sorry to our Raiders fans out there, the Broncos have a better roster than the Raiders do. Yeah. And his fiance lives in Boulder, Colorado. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's the chick from the Divergent series, I heard.
Yes, Shailene Woodley, the actress.
Nice. Shoot, I was going to say something about that. Now I can't remember what we were going to go with. Oh, I was going to talk about if you guys, either team lands Aaron Rodgers, that division's insane. You're going to have Patrick Mahomes versus Aaron Rodgers fighting for a division twice in a season.
And it's one of the reasons why I think Rodgers wants to come to the AFC West. Mm-hmm. He can be a little petty, and he's got issues with how much love everybody gives Patrick Mahomes. He's mentioned it in interviews in the past that when people say only Mahomes, and he's been doing these off-platform throws and everything, throwing no-look passes his whole career. I've even heard him say, people don't give Matt Stafford enough credit for the kind of throws that he makes, but everyone praises Mahomes. And one of the rumors is that he would love to face Mahomes twice a year and force the Chiefs to be a wild card team. That he kind of wants that feather in his cap, that he could go up against who everyone else is saying the best quarterback in the league is and show that he's better.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think we've spent enough time on Aaron Rodgers because everybody else is covering it as well.
Yes.
Quick sidebar. I know you're not huge into baseball, but did you see Albert Pujols got released yesterday?
I did. Yeah, man, quite the career.
I don't know what's about to happen to him. I just want to give a shout out to him because he meant so much to me when I watched baseball. My grandpa was a Cardinals fan, so kind of watching Pujols come up, rooting for the Cardinals for my grandpa, man, might be the best hitter I've ever seen. I got it down between Miguel Cabrera, Ken Griffey Jr., and Albert Pujols. So seeing him kind of hit under 200 and there's not room for him on the team. Sounds like he still wants to play because he was talking about while Anthony Rendon is out at third base, he'd be happy to go play over there because he came up as a shortstop
Yeah.
in the minors. So I'm thinking he's probably going to go somewhere, but if he doesn't, I just want to, and I know he's not going to listen, but I wanted to give him a thank you for everything and all the good times and the fun World Series runs that he had and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
So I had seen a tweet and you just reminded me of it
yeah.
when the news broke. And I'll give credit. This is Ryan Spader, who's an MLB analyst. He said Albert Pujols has gotten a hit off of 10.21% of all players to ever throw a pitch in a game. Like, that's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's unbelievable, man. And there's somebody that can hit with that much, that high of an average with power.
Mhm.
It's something else, like something I haven't seen other than Griffey and Miggy. And yeah, it's just time wins undefeated against everybody. Eventually they're gonna get out of their prime, but hopefully he finds somewhere that's a fit that he can maybe help with a little run at the end there.
Right.
All right, back to football. More my speed, fantasy football in
Yes.
particular. Had a lot of new rookies going
Yeah.
to teams. Sometimes these high rookies go high in the draft and they don't have that much of an impact because they're on a crappy team or they're an okay player and now they've just jumped in and they're a receiver with a great quarterback and things
Right.
like that. So I wanted to kind of get your fantasy outlook of who's going to be an instant impact this upcoming football season.
Yeah. So the top guy that comes to mind to me is Kyle Pitts, tight end for Atlanta. It can be kind of a tough position to find those premier fantasy players anyway. So I think that the way that it's set up, I would put him as a top 10 fantasy tight end, and he's got the upside to be one of the top 5 guys. So there's a lot of usage to go around between Julio Jones, if he stays in Atlanta, Calvin Ridley, but I really think Kyle Pitts is in for a monster rookie year. So I would have no problem having him as my primary tight end in any fantasy league format.
Yeah. That'd be cool. So just one tight end pretty much probably that we know about for now.
Yeah. There's Freiermuth from Notre Dame was like the number 2 guy, but I wouldn't really be drafting any rookie tight ends outside of Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. We're on wide receiver was a huge class this year. Deep. A lot of teams got him in the first 2 rounds even.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the wide receivers to keep an eye out for?
So the guy that I would rank the highest would be Jamar Chase. I think 1, from just how talented he is, but 2, going into a situation where he already has that built-in chemistry with the quarterback, Joe Burrow, and being able to be opposite T. Higgins on the outside with Tyler Boyd in the slot. He's probably going to, at least in the beginning of the season, he'll have some favorable matchups and he'll be able to make some noise. And then as teams have to kind of adjust to his side, opens things up for the other guys. But I see him as a fantasy wide receiver 2 this year. So a guy that you could be plugging into your starting lineup as a rookie.
Yeah, I actually really like what he does for the other guys, like you said, like Boyd and Higgins. I think they're going to be a lot better. Do we even know how Joe Burrows is doing in his recovery? Is he going to be ready to go or?
Supposed to be, yeah. Like, I don't know if he's going to make all the offseason like OTAs and all that, but he's supposed to be ready for training camp, to my understanding.
That was a rough injury. That looked painful.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, more receivers.
Yeah, so the next guy I put is Devonta Smith. Again, we've kind of mentioned the projection that is necessary for a 166-pound receiver.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think going into the situation that he is, you mentioned he's already got the connection with the quarterback. This is a recurring thing here for these rookie receivers, just going to the guys they played with in college. But I think he has a chance to be the number 1 receiver in the Eagles offense. I like Jalen Reagor a lot as well. But I think with Rager's deep speed, that helps open things up for Smith on the underneath and crossing routes and all that. So I think that volume, Smith has a chance to be a big contributor. Yeah. So I would see him as more of a kind of a flex guy. You maybe want to watch your week to week matchups, but he has the upside to be a wide receiver too.
Cool. And then you got Rashad Bateman for Baltimore.
Yeah. Another thing that I think he's going to go in and potentially be wide receiver 1. And similar to how Rager will be open things up. Hollywood Brown going deep is going to open things up for Bateman.
Yeah.
The only reason I would put him lower than Smith is just the volatility of the Ravens passing game. Like from week to week, is Lamar going to throw the ball or is he going to run the ball? You know, he can throw for 300 yards one week and then 100 the next week. So,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. I think Bateman will help with that, make the passing game a little bit more consistent, but I still would see him as more of a flex option, at least for year one.
Yeah, I get worried with these Ravens receivers, no matter who it is. Lamar Jackson, he's proven he can do it, you know. But yeah, like you said, whether it's going to be in the air or on the ground, and I'd say most of the time, I don't know if it was because lack of talent on the outside, but most of the time it's down to his tight end. So,
Yeah.
so I don't think I would go that high myself, but I could definitely see why. I just personally won't be doing that. What do you think about Jalen Waddle in Miami? Think he's going to do anything for me?
I do. So again, this is interesting. We talked about having other options in the passing game and how that can open things up. But then that also puts in some question of, well, who's going to be the guy that benefits from week to week? Miami has Will Fuller and Devontae Parker already, who are fantastic receivers. So I picture those guys being on the outside, and then Waddle's probably that guy that you're going to play in the slot or line him up in the backfield and kind of move him around. And so I think he's a big home run threat, but it's just a question of volume. How much does he get the ball year one compared to those two guys on the outside? So big play waiting to happen. If any injury were to occur, either of those first guys, his volume obviously goes way up.
Yeah.
So again, I'd kind of be like a week to week, watch the matchups, flex option, and see how it goes. But for sure, he needs to be on your roster.
Yeah. Hey, do you know what surprised me about the Dolphins draft is that we got another tight end when I feel like we're already pretty stacked at tight end. But looking into it a little more, it sounds like it might be Gesicki's last year with us.
Yeah.
Until we'd have to pay him. So
prepping. Yeah, I think that had it's been on the board, he's such an upgrade. You obviously make that move. But they waited till the third round to grab a guy. So I don't think they reached too much, and depth is good at that position.
Cool. Okay, so we got some receivers knocked out. Who's going to be the running back that benefits the most? The running back's most coveted position in fantasy football.
Absolutely.
If you get a top tier, it's a huge drop off after the elite. Is there anybody that's going to be making a name for themselves?
Yeah, so I think the guy that's going to go early is Najee Harris with Pittsburgh. And again, it's slotting in as number one running back in that offense right away. And from a fantasy perspective, you've seen what Le'Veon Bell has done, what James Conner has done. Harris can pick up in that same thing, that he's versatile. He's helping you in the run game. He's your short yardage back. He's your receiver out of the backfield. He's a complete 3-down player.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier with Pujols of, Father Time is undefeated. Yeah. And I'm anticipating, and you see it a little bit with all the injuries, but at some point, Big Ben's play is going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
When that happens and you're playing against the Steelers, you're going to start stacking the box for Harris and forcing Big Ben to beat you in the passing game. So that's the only thing that I would worry a little bit about Najee, is if Big Ben takes a big step backwards, that hurts, his value a little bit because of how defenses will play him. But I think Najee is an RB2 starting in your lineup week to week.
Yeah. The next running back off the board was that Travis Etienne from Clemson. He's reuniting with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Right. So, I mean, you got chemistry there, but I don't know how much chemistry matters for running back quarterback. Does it much? Or?
Yeah, I think it does. And again, it's a matter of Etienne is a complete 3-down back that was used a lot in the passing game. The main issue with Jacksonville would be that James Robinson is already there.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have some sort of timeshare.
Because James Robinson was like top of yards per carry last year, wasn't he?
Right. And so I see him as more of like the Thunder to Etienne's Lightning. I mean, there's more to Etienne's game than just his speed. He's a complete back, but there's going to be some split in the reps, I think. And so definitely roster Etienne, but he would be more of a flex option for me until I can see how they're using him and what his usage is compared to James Robinson.
Yeah. Okay. And then I got your list here, and it looks like you have Michael Carter over Javonte Williams.
Yeah, and again, it's a matter of I think Carter has an easier path to getting the touches.
Yeah, because
Just
it's not always about the talent. It really just comes down to who got lucky into a fit.
yeah.
Like you said,
So
Javonte Williams is going to have to share time with Melvin Gordon.
Gordon, right? So Carter and Williams, both coming out of UNC, both are fantastic running backs. They're good all around 3-down backs. But the way that North Carolina used them, Carter was more the 3rd-down receiving threat. So I think he'll fit that role right away with the Jets. That will be where he'll start. But then he's just got to beat out Tevin Coleman to be the main guy. And I think as the season goes on, he'll eventually do that. Yeah. So I would put him higher. It's harder to beat out Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon's a very good player.
Yeah, he's solid.
In the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season last year, he was a top 5 fantasy running back. Yeah. So as he kind of got his stride in Denver, and as they started giving him more of the usage and using,
and that was still less. Yeah, that was still with sharing some time too with other running backs.
So Javonte Williams, super talented. I think he's a lot more talented, and I love Phillip Lindsay, but more all around 3-down back than Phillip Lindsay was.
Yeah.
So he's going to eat into Melvin Gordon's carries, but I don't expect him to be the starter. So it's just going to be kind of over time.
And that's fair to say about Lindsay, man. Like, he was an undrafted free agent, and the value that you guys got out of him was more than you could have ever asked for. But Absolutely. At the same time, he's an undrafted free agent for a reason, because there's things that other people can do better. So I mean, it's a good upgrade. It's he did good service for you guys, and he did what he needed to do. But
yeah, and the fan base, because he's a Colorado kid, he grew up in Denver, went to University of Colorado, but ultimately he was limited when it came to the receiving game, and he was a smaller guy, so love him. He had two different seasons of over 1,000 yards for an undrafted guy, but they did upgrade by getting Javonte Williams.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Any quarterbacks that you think can make an impact out the gate?
Yeah, so it's hard to project how a rookie QB is going to fare fantasy-wise, because they tend to struggle. That's typical. It's the hardest position in sports to play.
Yeah.
So looking at the situation again, I think that Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson have the most straightforward path to being the starter right from the beginning. Trey Lance may be backing up Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll see. Justin Fields probably backing up Andy Dalton to start. So I think you probably might want these guys on your roster for like the second half of the year.
Yeah.
And they give you good value as a backup. But I don't think I'm investing in any of those 4 to be my primary starting quarterback this year.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. The only direction I might go, like if it was late and they started showing like maybe that they'll become the starter, would be Lance or Fields, somebody that can
give you that run game.
Yeah, because I mean, running gets you so many points that even if you have a shitty game, like you still got 100 rushing yards and a touchdown or something like that. So,
Absolutely.
So I would definitely consider that. Back to reality football, the real game. Give me some teams that haven't been in the playoffs, weren't in the playoffs last year, that you think the draft could propel them into the draft this year.
Yeah, so I think between the combination of the draft and free agency, or players coming back from injury, I would look at a team like Dallas in the NFC. I think they could move up. I would project them to win the division right now. So I think they make the playoffs. Denver is another team that, for the AFC side, I think could move up into that, especially if they get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
That certainly puts them high up in the AFC. And as far as the teams that could drop out, I think the Colts, they were the 7 seed last year, so they'd be in the most volatile position. So I could see them drop down. We'll see how the Carson Wentz thing goes. There's some questions there. The Steelers, if Big Ben does fall off a cliff with his play, as tends to happen with quarterbacks in their
we're starting
late 30s. Yeah. I could see the Steelers drop out as well. And then on the NFC side, the Saints post Drew Brees, what's that going to look like?
Yeah.
And then obviously, if Green Bay doesn't have Rodgers, whether it's through a trade or he retires, I could see them missing the playoffs.
Yeah. Cool, man. I think that was a pretty solid show. We got a lot of information in, had some fun, and I
Absolutely.
think we just nailed it right under an hour, right over an hour. So
Perfect.
right where I wanted to be. Thanks
Good.
again, man, for coming on. It's always great chilling with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll be seeing you soon, if not before Beer Fest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, brother.
All right. We'll see you, man.
Take care.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.